Our speaker today is a longtime member of our congregation, Dr. Sharon Scholl, Professor Emerita from Jacksonville University, where she taught everything but the kitchen sink, all of which she summarizes as cultural history. She has been one of our church musicians and a member of most working committees. So here she is to deliver some possibly unwanted advice about what lies ahead for our congregation. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend, Sharon Scholl.
You're muted.
Good morning, friends. This summer, we have been considering the future from different perspectives, including race relationships, our immigrant status, and environmental justice. Today, we're looking close to home into our own church's possible future and the choices that lie ahead. In all such inquiries, the last person you would think to consult would be an elderly, opinionated loudmouth. Unfortunately, your worship committee overlooked this pearl of wisdom. So here we go. In our immediate future lies the issue of how to make use of this period of remote attendance outside of our familiar space. We can go on making substitutions for what used to be, like our worship service that we're doing now, our several Sunday classes, adult education, and we have book clubs, we have women's meetings, and when we finally reassemble, we will probably look back on this period as a regrettable lapse and be so glad it's over. But we could put some significant time and talent and energy and a little bit of funds into making a permanent place for ourselves on the web. Think about weekly, maybe half-hour classes on practical theology, on healthy eating, even something a little strange like a Sunday 10 p.m. pajama vespers. Well, do we have the energy, enthusiasm, and volunteer talent to choose a new and more creative option? Some of our future could depend upon choices just like this. Looking back a bit farther out, we will eventually acquire a minister, and we can do so leaving our bylaws, our contract provisions, our board processes and such, just as they have been for years. And we will run a high risk of the kind of breakdown that we have experienced with our past two ministries, and yet even another one before that. Or we can change conditions to give our ministers the power to defend their ministries against what we see so clearly can bring our church down. So will we insist and support a better balance of power? A lot of misery could be avoided if we make the right choice in this case. During these next years, we must determine whom our church is for. Right now, we are being urged, even shamed, into reshaping our worship services and our social processes to accommodate Black culture, Latino culture, and secular commercial culture. These seem to be the three pressure points. I see churches trying to stitch a patchwork of service out of incompatible parts and becoming an enigma to everyone. Garrison Keillor often pokes gentle fun at Unitarian Universalists as a people who talk endlessly about everything, because we can't make up our collective mind about anything. If congregational diversity means we are obliged to include in every worship service cultural products of important minority groups, get ready to memorize half a dozen hymns in Spanish and welcome every few weeks a nice rap sermon. Imagine how December would go with a week devoted to Kwanzaa celebrations, another few days to Las Pasadas ceremonies, winter season observances of our pagans we would certainly want to include, along with an Anglo-American Christmas Eve service, and certainly our many secular agnostics would prefer to spend the whole month with Santa Claus is coming to town. It's a losing game, trying to adapt ourselves to every possible cultural permutation while not being authentic to any of them. Nobody counsels Black churches. Look, folks, you've got to diversify. You have to change so that white folks and Asians and all these other folks would want to join you. I mean, you've got to tone down that sermon, man. And what's all that swaying about? We don't do that because these people have these valuable traits which express themselves perfectly and have ended up to be a special cultural heritage which their members care about. In truth, we UUs also have our own culture, homegrown over several centuries with roots in the Protestant Reformation. We have 7 principles which we have failed to distill into a healthy ritual life. We have our own theology, which we don't teach nearly as well as we should, and we leave our children defenseless against the schoolyard bully who tells them they're going to hell. Our history clearly shows that we will always occupy the far edge of the religious spectrum, especially in this anti-intellectual and anti-scientific era. But instead of reveling in this position and teaching its implications proudly, we are often seized by a collective embarrassment, hence the elevator speech that aims to make us as palatable as possible. Our church will soon confront the problem of religious education for our children. Our latest structure to achieve this has unfortunately collapsed, and those most intimately connected with that misfortune are convinced the core problem is our congregation's treatment of children and young families as something we maybe should do something about, as long as we personally can remain uninvolved. We have lost faith in the old adage that children are the future of the church because we found they're not. Many of our children leave at maturity. Perhaps we have been so careful to teach about Buddhism, Taoism, Sufism, all the real religions, that our children find it easy to join one. For our children's sake, we must define ourselves clearly and teach that definition consistently. The religious education of our children is no place for flabby broad-mindedness. So that's some of the future as I see it, and it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for those who want to turn our church into another social club, those who need it to reinforce their unexamined ideas, and those who want the church to reflect the consumer-driven commercial culture they're familiar with. The Old Testament prophet Zechariah promised a great inheritance to the remnant who remain. Here we are today, you and I. We are the remnant that remain. And the inheritance is ours if we have the courage to choose it. Blessed be.